Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Saturday talk. I'm Scott Smith. I am here to give that talk. I'm back home. I've just returned from Sacramento, and I had a really restful couple of days before I started working again. And then all my beautiful clients started to come through, and I'm actually taking the day off again, and we're going to Ojai today, so I'm excited for that. I'll have some photos on the Instagram later of that trip. I woke up this morning fairly early and I've had my coffee, and I really didn't know what I was going to deliver today. Um, Again, this is an experiment. I'm doing this and just see what happens. I made a commitment. That is, I did some magic, and in that magic, in a group setting, I had a vision, and in that vision, there were some things to be done. And this was one of them. And they said Saturday service, and I said, what does that mean? And I didn't get an answer, so I'm exploring to find out. There are a couple other things as well. You will notice if you go to my website, starandstonellc.com, that there's some expanded services there. And there will be some future classes that are coming that are really revolving around the messages that I got out of my spirit work that I want to bring to the world. And if you're in the area, tomorrow, at the UU Church of the Verdugo Hills, which is in the Glendale, Montrose, La Cañada area, I will be giving a talk on the Wheel of the Year to the congregation there, and that will also be on their Zoom, so if you have the opportunity for that, tune in. So today, what do I want to say? The moon is in Libra, so I'm carrying Rose Quartz. To tap into that soft, high heart energy, that pink ray of light that brings a softness and illumination. It might gently tug at the shadow or the places where we feel we might be harboring some hurt or grief or not wanting anything to get in, and that rose quartz energy can soften us to those spaces so that light can get into those areas and help us to heal. When I sat to think about today, to say, what are we going to talk about? What's going to come through here? And I opened myself to whatever that response would be. The thing I thought of was vision and losing our vision. And what I mean by that is, we operate on stories. We're creatures of ideas and stories. We have stories about our childhood and our past and our future and what we're doing and who we are in the world. And all of these stories sort of cycle through us. And for some of us, it's a whirlwind. And for some of us, it's very structured. And for some of us, it's jambalaya, right? Like it's a mixture of things and it's all together. And I personally feel like we should aim for the jambalaya. Once we understand what's in the whirlwind and we've structured it, it should formulate very beautifully for us, whatever that might look like for each of us as individuals. The way our stories come together, is up to us, because that's part of our identity in our life and the direction that we're going. But the components of those stories are very interesting. And for me, they sort of fall into categories, and not exclusively and only into those categories, but I like to look at a structure of those things to say, like, what is this story or what is this truth that I'm really following right now? There are personal truths and there are personal stories. I am me. I am who I am in the world, and I have my experience, and this is what I feel, and this is what I believe. And these are subjective, often insubstantial truths, just things that are convictions that I believe about myself or I know to be true about me that may or may not have concrete evidence in the world. And these are important because we all have those. And I believe they're part of our soul growth and direction. And then there are other kinds of, there's like relative truths, like about the concrete reality, such as gravity, right? You fall down, right? Gravity holds us in place, and loosely the way that light in the universe works, the atomic clock of the universe, this kind of divine timing of the way that the planets spin, and that we can measure this and understand that this is something that is there. And these laws can be defied in certain ways, but for the most part, they appear to be immutable. They are what they are. And then there are other truths, right? There are cultural truths, there are cultural stories, and then there are those ones that are the universal or spiritual truths, maybe we might say. All the spiritual truths can be categorized in all of those sorts of things. I like to see the universal truths as spiritual truths. They're the things that we can't necessarily measure, but that we can agree are true because they appear in our spirituality around the world, and they focus on like birth and death and transition, and oftentimes have stories about why we are here. And when we are born into those truths, culturally or familially, like in our family is a certain religious or spiritual background, we grow up with them and they help us to sort of navigate the world. And I think that we've had certain cultural and or spiritual truths or universal truths for a long time. And these have sort of been thrown into a vortex as the internet has grown, and we've been exposed to more variations of those truths. And we started to see how they can be different. And this has caused them to sort of fray or come apart or go into, the cauldron of creation, if you will, like that is the internet itself as we all add to it. Some are adding great ingredients and some not so much, but it sort of boils down these truths as we start to see like, let's look at the jambalaya metaphor. Like, oh, this is this squash that I have here. But in your area, you call the squash this, or it tastes like that. It's sweeter, it's sour, it's whatever it is. And these change the flavor of these truths. What we know grows. But in order for that growth to happen, we have to be in the place where these universal truths about what we think about the shape of reality can also be questioned, right? The problem is, I feel, when I'm looking at now, is that there's the argument about what the universal truths are. The argument about the story, the meta story about what we're doing as species or as kind. And you see this in news cycles, and you see this in protests, and you see this in healthy discussions and in classes, like we just had a class where we talked about the science of magic, because I teach the Temple of Witchcraft Mystery School here in Los Angeles, and that's the lesson that we're on. And so we look at things like string theory and butterfly effect and the subatomic, and how reality is really seen from a scientific point of view. And this coming month we'll look at the magic of like the science of magic. We'll flip it around, flip the script, and sort of look at it that way. But it's to understand that even when we get down to those very small particles of things, reality operates differently. So do truths. So do truths. So when we have something that's true on a personal level, this may not be true at a concrete material level, but it doesn't invalidate it, right? It doesn't make it immune to question either. Because I think all truths, when they become immune to question, are fragile and dangerous. We have to be able to question our truths, because we don't grow if a truth cannot be questioned. The issue we may encounter is that we want there to suddenly be one monumental truth that covers all things, like a pan-truth, right? And those tend to be those universal cosmic or spiritual truths, which aren't necessarily concrete, right? They tend to be like big meta stories about how we are in the world, but they can't necessarily be measured by scientific means or necessarily agreed upon by everyone, because people have different stories about them. But we look for those themes. Think about Joseph Campbell or any of those mythologists or great storytellers who are able to see the story in Sufism and, in a Kemetic tradition and in a local indigenous, First Nation people's story and see how we're all speaking towards the same truth, even though we have different approaches to it. That truth may be different than the truth that we know in our body, that we know to be true as a soul in the world versus the concrete reality. Think about identity when we know something to be true at the core of our being, but the physical reality is different, and we have to go through a transition to create that reality, so that that truth is living. That's part of the job of our personal, ourselves and our personal truths, to express them into the world so that they can be here. Because no truth is absolute in that sense, that if we're creatures of story, right, and that we're involved in these stories, we're also storytellers. But to be a storyteller is not like a thing of fantasy, right? And even if it is a thing of fantasy, fantasy is involved in the mythos of our lives, helping us to navigate this physical reality and find our personal truths in it. We're here to create, right? We're here to create and be a part of the creative process. So don't get fixed. Don't get stuck on the story or the truths or what is, or these finite particles of a story, as if there's some sort of hinge or clause upon which everything else must bend to their turning, or it's all invalid. Because that's a trap. That's a fragile, hard trap where things get broken. Be open to multiple perspectives. Look for multiple truths. What is my truth? What is the truth of reality? What is the story that we're telling each other right now in this group, or this culture? And what's the universal truth here? What's going on? And how do these things sort of come together in me right now in my consciousness? This is an exercise in freedom, right? Like, it really helps us to see things from a bigger perspective, because when we come too narrowly focused, we lose the perspective of the periphery and we are blinded to other truths, and that's important. So I just wanted to throw that out there today. I pulled some cards because I'm really loving the B Tarot. This little deck is just a gem, and I'm really grateful for the artist and author for putting this together. We have the Four of Pentacles there. That is, be careful of possessiveness. Be careful of miserliness. Be careful of trying to win over, take, or secure for yourself. Some camps might call that a lack mentality, right? But it is a miserliness, or is a possessiveness. It is a very closed mind, me, I need to get this. It's a neediness that lacks a vision. It's only focused on one's personal needs. It can say, what are your personal needs right now? And are you helping yourself to fulfill them? And that might tap into the last couple of weeks I've been talking. The second I pulled, and I really love this card, Strength, which doesn't depict the lion. It actually picks the beekeeper and the bees, and that exhibit of strength is not about putting your hand in the lion's mouth, but actually working with the bees and not getting stung, because they understand that you're not there to harm the hive, that you're there to harvest and retain, right, the integrity of the hive itself. Harvest and retain the integrity of the hive itself. How do we meet those needs without damaging the integrity of the system that we're all collectively working in, without damaging the story which we're all participating in? Where do we see that that strength is being used for ill or selfish ends? And how do we address that story and maybe help those folks tell a new story by inspiring them with something more inspirational? The last card also I mean, I gotta be honest, I love all the cards in this deck, but this is one of my favorites, is the Magician. I really love the infinity on this one and the way this card is depicted. And, you know, there are the four tools, the sword, the pentacle, the wand, and the jar, which would be the cups in this one. And actually the fifth tool is the crown, is the infinity sign, is that spirit above them. And this says to remind us to think of those four truths. And our four tools, how are they expressed? What are they good for, right? How can we be more creative, cooperative, constructive? How do we tap into the catabolic powers at our disposal to really break something down and understand the minutia, and how can be rebuilt back up again, right? What is, my question of the week is this: what is the big picture story? Have we forgotten it? And how do we start to come back around that big picture story? Because I feel in certain ways, I could answer that question myself and say, well, the big picture story might be like the environment. That's a very, very loud big picture story. And you have places in the world where they're signing into law that, like, you can't talk about it. That's factually not true, which is a denial of the factual reality over a spiritual or religious narrative, like saying that's more important than the factual reality. We've lost the thread of that big story, right? Did we ever have it? How do we reclaim it? What's the big picture story in your family, in your group, in your coven, in your gathering? What's the big picture story? And how do you translate that through your personal story into this collective reality so that we can share in it? This light can be used to bring people together. Are you including everyone in that light? Because a big picture story includes everyone. And when we're in these stories where we've lost the big narrative, and there are big narrative things happening, we need all cooperators. We need everyone to come in around this to help solve the problem. And when we have those, however righteous or correct they might feel, demanding that there is only one correct story, we polarize. And when we polarize, as Ram Dass says, we feed the opposite. We add fuel to the opposition, and we need all cooperators. We need to understand that everyone is welcome to the big story and start to work on that and bring people back in. What's your story? What's the big picture story? What's your group story? And how do you work with it? This is Scott Smith. Thank you for watching this week. Welcome back to my home as we tell this story. As I tell this story this week, I can be found at starandstonellc.com. I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Scott K. Smith. The S, the K, the S are capitalized. I don't know if that matters. I like to say it. And I'm on Instagram, and I'm all over the place, and I have lots of free stuff, and this is one of my free offerings. I just like to stir the cauldron of community. I like to get the pot bubbling and turning and see what can creatively, constructively come together for the greater community, not necessarily just my personal community. Start there and see what you can create. Blessed be, blessed be, blessed be, and thanks for watching.